Hey friends, and welcome to Mortisect. Today we have a special show. We are doing found footage horror films, which actually is one of my personal favorite subgenres in horror. And as always, I have my co-star, Tatiana Szpur.
Hello, everyone. And I also want to introduce our special guest today. We have Adam Lucas returning, writer-director Adam Lucas.
Thank you for having me.
And we have a new special guest, Alison Gregory. She is an accomplished actor. She's known for movies The Empty House and It Plays Like Love. She also has a lot of theater credits, including Shakespeare's As You Like It and Samuel Beckett's Not I. She has an MFA in acting from Harvard University. Welcome, Alison. We're so excited to have you here today.
So glad to be here. Thank you.
We just wanted to ask you a couple of questions before we get started. Is that okay?
Of course.
Okay. So the first thing I wanted to know is, why did you decide to become an actor?
That is a great question. I wanted to act from the time that I was probably 4 or 5. Like, it was just something I always knew that I wanted to do. It's a passion that, like, I had as a little kid, and then it, like, never went away. I was doing, like, plays in the backyard with my cousins and, you know, and then eventually in high school, and it was always something that I wanted to do. I don't even know when it started because it's always been there.
It's just been part of you.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And what is your dream role?
My dream role is probably Blanche in Streetcar Named Desire.
Oh.
I would love to do that role. I saw it with Cate Blanchett at BAM a few years ago. It was probably like 10 or 15 years ago at this point, actually. Feels like a few years, but and she was phenomenal, which was not a surprise. But I think that role is so nuanced and so hard to do well, I think, as any, beautifully written role is. Mm-hmm. So that would be the dream. Probably.
Amazing. I love Tennessee Williams.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And then last question is, what advice do you have for other actors that are starting out? Because it's such a hard industry.
Another great question. It is a really hard industry. I would say get trained, really work on your craft, but also make sure that if you want to be an actor as your career, make sure that you are focused on and willing to learn about the business side. That's a whole other function that you really have to be aware of and get good at if you want to be an actor. But if you're not interested in that side of it and you just want to become a really good crafts person, find a training program, do as many plays as you can. You don't have to go to a training program. Just do the work. Get involved. Go be in a community theater show. Go write a show. Do the work. And remember that you don't need any program to define you or to give you legitimacy. You're an actor. And just remember that starting out, I would say.
And I do have one question. It's the question I ask everyone. I asked Adam, what is your favorite horror film?
Oh, this is so good. We've talked about this a lot.
Oh, indeed.
Because my favorite horror film, I think, is kind of a cliche, but I don't care. It's The Shining.
That's a great film.
That's amazing.
Okay, I just
There's
think...
no shame in that one.
I think it's so good, but I feel like... We've talked about this, right? I feel like sometimes it's thought of as like, I don't know, it's like an obvious choice or something.
It's a
popular
what I mean? One, but for a reason, because it's so brilliantly done. And
yes.
My former acting teacher, Ann Jackson, is in that film. She plays the psychologist.
Really?
So I used to study acting at HB Studios.
Wait.
Yeah,
the one
that's
who's
very
like,
cool.
the one who goes to the house and she's talking to Wendy and she's like, oh my God, she's so good.
She was, and it was intimidating because I remember auditioning in front of her and I had to pick like a monologue and I picked one that had a lot of cursing. I just went all in and I started just going off. I added a few curses and then she looked at me and she goes, is that how you normally talk in front of a lady? And I said, well, sometimes when you're an actor, you have to do that type of stuff. And then I got into her class and I wasn't the best actor, but I just took that chance. But she was amazing. Just seeing her. And she was married to Eli Wallach, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
I had
and
no idea.
He was an amazing character actor, and he would come to class occasionally. So I never wanted to do a scene because, again, I was okay, but it was like, oh man, this is like a heavy-hitting class. But that's when I think of that movie.
Is
that
brilliant.
Was so,
I know exactly what scene you're talking about. It's so, that's amazing. Yeah, I think that film is so good. I think the performances are just astounding. The writing is amazing, and I think the cinematography is so creepy and weird, and it sticks with me in a way that no other horror film has, I think. So that's my pick.
That's a great pick.
Okay, good.
Do you ever see the documentary they have for Stanley
Yes.
Kubrick where they were showing all the hidden meaning? Like they had, I think,
Yes.
Apollo. Was it Apollo 11?
Yes.
I think
yes.
so. And they were saying all the stuff like with the moon landing conspiracy.
The carpet looks like the launch pad.
Yes, and there's
Yes.
something with like Calumet baking powder or
That was
something
another one,
too,
that's
right?
right, yeah.
Did I make that up?
No, that's
a
right,
thing.
that's
okay.
right.
I love it.
It's
So I
okay.
like
It's
I like
room
going down that.
237, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so
My high school had a tradition of like putting up all the photos. Like when you graduate, they take a picture of the graduating class, and it goes way back because my high school I think was founded in like the 1800s or like
wow.
early 1900s, very old. And I always felt like I was like going to become a character in The Shining. Like I'm there now. Like I've been back for alumni events, and I'm like, there I am. Like I'm stuck inside the
Taking that
history.
picture, the black and white photo.
I'm there
Like this
forever.
wedding gown.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
That's
hilarious.
great.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
Do you know, this is a total aside, but do you guys know the Walk of Life project from like 15 years ago?
Oh,
So basically,
it's so
some
good.
guy just
my
took
God.
a bunch of the endings of famous films and put Dire Straits' The Walk of Life over top of it as if that's the score. And it's funny, but the one
it's
for
so
The
good.
Shining is iconic. I mean, it's absolutely laugh out loud,
It
hysterically
makes it an
good.
entirely different movie.
Yeah,
like
just-
a very funny
Yeah, it's
dad
very good.
going on a trip with his son.
Yeah, yeah,
It's brilliant.
yeah.
You don't realize how music really can change the mood of a scene. You can put
No.
funny music
Oh,
in.
100%.
It's hilarious, and you put that horrific sound. Yeah,
Well, people talk about this all the time with horror films, right? Like, if you don't want to be frightened by a horror film, watch it with the volume off and just take the score out of it because it really decreases the effect of the film. And I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So who would like to go first? Is anybody privy to going first?
I will jump in and get it out of the way,
Jump
make
in.
my mistakes first.
That's great.
That sounds
All
good.
right.
Let's do that.
So we're doing found footage, right?
Found
So
footage.
This was a hard assignment for me. I think I found out when you guys suggested it. I didn't think I would have as many films that I wanted to talk about as I did, but I found myself with a grab bag of films that I felt like I could go on for. But I didn't realize I liked this subgenre as much as I do. I thought about talking about Unfriended, which I really like. I think because of the experience that I had watching it, I didn't know that's the film that takes place entirely on a computer screen with
Yes.
4 people on a Skype call, and I didn't know anything about it when I first watched it. And I had the apartment to myself. I turned the lights off. I had my AirPods in. And watched the film like I was in the Skype call. And it just scared the crap out of me in the best way. I love that. I wanted to talk about One Cut of the Dead, which may be a bit of a reach in terms of found footage. But ultimately, I think that film is the best way to watch that film is to know nothing about it going in. So I couldn't talk about that. So anyway, it's a long way of saying I settled on Ghostwatch, which I think is kind of a classic of the genre, right? So released in 1992 as a BBC production. So this is 7 years before the Blair Witch Project. And I think one of the things that the Blair Witch Project did that made it be successful was the context around it made us believe that something like this could happen, right? The internet was young. We didn't yet know it could lie to us, which feels incredibly naive at this,
Yeah.
at
Oh
my
this
God.
point.
Say that again.
But it had a website and it said this story was real, and there was a sci-fi channel documentary that said it was real. So whether or not you believed in the film, you believed that something like this could happen or was going on. And I think Ghostwatch did that really well 7 years prior. The film was written, produced, directed ahead of time. It was a film, but it was presented to the audience as if this was a BBC broadcast of a live broadcast of a real paranormal investigation into a local haunted house.
So welcome live this Halloween night to the first ever TV Ghostwatch.
The people that are cast in the film are presenters that audiences would have been familiar with as people who presented them the news and facts at face value. There was a dial-in number, a call-in number where you could call in as if it was live.
Hello, your name is?
I don't want to give my name, but I think I have some information for you about the history of the house.
There was a telephone bank of people taking your calls. The number was active. This was the real number the BBC used during these productions. There was no reason to believe what was happening wasn't real. And for the first hour, almost nothing happens, right? It's exactly what you would expect. It's a few people, it's some cameramen walking around, recounting ghost stories that may or may not have happened, looking around going, oh, you hear a voice up there? Is there a noise up there? It's everything you would expect if you tuned into an episode of Ghost Adventures. So very slowly and deliberately and methodically, this film pulls you in and convinces you that what you're watching is real until you buy it. And then it starts to go off the rails until you get something that is almost like a James Wan film of a horror set piece, right?
Oh, Jesus. Jimmy. Susie.
And I just think it is absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's impeccably crafted, relatively innovative, and people bought in. I think tens of thousands of people called into this number to say that they were seeing ghosts on the screen and experiencing things that actually created a controversy, which is a story for another time. There's a lot of context to unpack around this film. But I think we often think of the Blair Witch Project as one of the progenitors of the found footage genre. And this is a film that operated in the same way, doing a lot of the same things, incredibly successfully, to the point where there were lawsuits against it for psychological damage it caused people who watched it 7 years prior. Maybe it's a little dry now watching it, but to me, I still think it's really fun. I think it's like tuning into an episode of Ghost Adventures if they were successful at what they wanted to be successful at. Imagine if you tuned into an episode of Ghost Adventures and a ghost showed up. That's what watching this film is like. And I just think it's really well made and a really fun watch.
I believe that the two of the main characters were already newscasters in the BBC. So that also
legitimized.
Exactly, Allison. So it legitimized it. And I believe, like you were mentioning the history of it too. Towards the end, you see everything happening, and then I would imagine that if I saw like the studio going up and all this like things, all this crazy stuff happening.
Quickly! That people are leaving the studio now.
That I would say, well, wait a minute, this could be like a War of the Worlds moment.
It's exactly what it came across as, I think.
So maybe, I wonder if the BBC thought that that would take people out of it and then they would realize, or I think it was banned from, do you know that story, that it was banned? And
it was. There are some negative circumstances surrounding it. I mean, that we could certainly talk about. I mean, I think there are some people who said that it led to real psychological harm. And yeah, I mean, there was litigation brought against it for the damage that it caused the individuals, primarily younger viewers who watched it. And I think one of the controversies was one of those broadcasters was the host of a children's television show. So although this was being aired sort of later at night, although it was presented at the top with a production banner, I think that sort of would have implied to people had no reason to believe that this isn't, what they were watching wasn't real. And so their kids are tuning in and their kids are watching someone that they're familiar with. And so, yeah, I think it just, everything that they did was exactly the right thing to do to get people to buy in, to believe it. And of course that created a lot of controversy surrounding the film. So,
and you have that buy-in too. It's very much like you mentioned the Blair Witch. When I saw that, I didn't know. I thought it was real.
Yeah.
Right?
So did I.
So it's insane. What is it about that film that you enjoy? Because I noticed when Adam was speaking about it, you mentioned about it being a classic too. Now, did you already know of the movie before Adam? Did you introduce it to him, or you both knew of it?
I knew of it. I didn't. It's almost like my reaction wasn't totally unbiased, because Adam had explained it to me before we watched it. I don't even know how it came up one day. You were just like, you've got to like watch this movie. It's so crazy. And he set up the whole thing for me. So I was so excited to watch. I went in with an informed opinion of it. And I just thought it was the coolest concept ever. It's just such a novel idea. I mean, for the time, right?
Absolutely.
Very novel, and creepy. Like I don't know that. I don't know if people would consider it scary now. Do you think?
I wonder. It still feels to me like it's a classic ghost story, just told sort of with new technology, but it reads like a classic ghost story. So I find it engaging.
Yeah.
I don't know. I always wonder how people would approach that movie today.
It would be hard to set it up as a live experience now because of streaming.
It's so true.
And I think that's like really what makes it terrifying is the live experience.
Yes.
I almost feel like it's a little bit of a precursor to, unless they had it, I don't know if they had it in 1992, but like, was reality TV as big? You know what I mean? Because you watch reality shows and you wonder how much is scripted.
It's a good question. I don't know.
I mean, that was right around the reality TV.
I could date myself on that. 92.
Was it Real World?
No. Not yet.
No, Real World was happening, I believe.
Was it really?
I think so.
Although at that time, just living in the city, I didn't have cable. Cable came later to the city.
Okay.
And then my dad didn't want to pay for it. And then it came even later in my household.
Yes, fair enough.
But that was really the first MTV. It was really the first. But other than that, it was always scripts. I remember 92, like The Simpsons. Certain shows were like, this is the big show. But it was really sitcoms. sitcoms.
was
So
sitcoms, yeah.
I think the Europeans were ahead of the game because even the first film that's attributed in this genre is Cannibal Holocaust. And
gosh.
they thought it was real, that so much so that they brought the director in, I think, and they wanted to see the actors.
They went to court.
Yeah,
They
they
made
went
the
to
actors
court for
appear in
that.
court to
Really?
prove they were not dead. I
That's
think.
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was still pretty novel. So I could see if you put that on in America, I think people probably would have had the same.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be savvy to that type of filming. You know?
Right. Well, there was something. I know there was something similar on CBS a few years after about like. They had real. I can't remember what it was. Boy, it's gonna be a terrible story. All right. It was presented as a real broadcast, and you had somebody who you trusted as a news broadcast reading essentially what was like, "We have gone to nuclear war," and it caused an uproar in the similar way because people were just used to getting their news in this way from legacy news media, like you're saying. There was no social media. There was no way to communicate in and amongst ourselves as quickly. So you're relying on the television. There was something similar in America a few years after. I just don't remember the name of it.
I remember a lot of documentaries. So they would have stuff, especially on Channel 5 at the time here, they would have stuff that was kind of like a pseudo documentary, like with aliens, and then they would talk about accounts and all these different things and the footage. And so that was pretty popular at that time. But no, not, it really. That's why I think the genre is so amazing, because the lower the budget, the more realistic it looks,
so
and the more
Absolutely. Oh my
people
God, it's
start
so true.
buying in. If it's so
Yeah.
polished like a Hollywood plus
Totally.
tax, a Hollywood film. See, I told you about that. That's right. Anytime we flub on the show, I usually say plus tax. And there's a story to that. Elvis was doing a concert when Martin Scorsese was filming a documentary about him. And Elvis forgot the words to the song, so he's going, plus tax. So,
plus tax.
oh, that's the
Stealing
Elvis.
this.
He completely, so that's mine. So feel free to use plus tax. But anyway, yeah, it's one of those genres. If it's not like a Hollywood film, you're like, all right, I think it's cool. It looks great, but I'm not fully invested. When you think something actually happened, which in some of the films we're going to talk about, you certainly see that.
Yeah.
It really adds another level.
Yeah, I think so.
100%.
too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think that's one of the things that's interesting about Ghostwatch is it commits to the bit so hard that for the first hour, it is kind of boring because that's what you expect. And that's what they need you to expect to buy into what they're going to do in that last 30 minutes. Yeah, absolutely.
What's the chance, do you think, of us seeing anything tonight?